Hello, my lovelies, and welcome to the channel this week. After the craziness of the last few weeks, I'm focusing on being a little bit gentle with myself and just taking it easy. Now, I know it's the lead up to Christmas and it's very, very difficult to take it easy, but I'm just taking this moment in time just to do something for me. Now, you guys know I've been on a bit of a journey to get back to making sourdough, and my sourdough starter is finally up and running again, which I am over the moon about. So now that the market is over and done with, I'm finding my rhythm of getting back into doing sourdough, and that just brings me a lot of joy because the possibilities of what I can make are just, there's lots of possibilities. So at the moment, I am refilling my bread flour jar because it was running very, very low. I buy my flour in 16 kilo sacks, which is a lot of flour to store. So what I do is I store it in a 5-gallon bucket, and that has a special type of lid on it called a gamma lid, which makes it airtight. It stops any wee beasties getting into it, and it also keeps it fresher. And I decant it into a smaller container just to make it easier to get to. Now, what I'm going to do today is a bit of an experiment for me. I'm trying out a recipe that I got from Hopewell Heights, and it is for purple sourdough. So I'm a bit excited about this because who doesn't like coloured food? And this is using a natural dye, so there's no synthetic dyes, so it's not going to send you off the charts, loopy, if food dyes is what affects you. So I am just weighing out ingredients at the moment. It's a bit different from how I would normally make bread. Usually I use cup measures to do it, and that generally works out okay. But because I'm using someone else's recipe, I'm wanting to use their measurements exactly so that I can give the recipe a fair try. So this is what's going to give us the purple colour. It is purple sweet potato powder, or ube powder. I picked this up in the Asian supermarket in Belfast. You can order it online, but it was a lot cheaper for me to get it from the Asian supermarket. So we'll see how we get on with this. And I've measured the water out in grams as well. Just die-hard sourdough bread makers, they weigh everything out and they have the hydration measured, and it just it's a bit too complicated for my brain, working all that out. I know maybe I'll get into it in future days, but at the moment I just like to dump and go. So I have put the water in the bowl along with the ube powder, and we give that a bit of a mix, just to make sure it's dissolved and all combined. So you can see it's a really, really vibrant, lovely purple colour there. Now I think I must have not hit record, but I've added my sourdough starter and my flour into the bowl there, and I've just mixed it to a kind of shaggy dough. There's no kneading having gone on, and what we're going to do is we're going to leave it to do a process called autolyse, and what this means is you leave it for half an hour or so, and it just lets the flour absorb the water. And this is before you put the salt in. As you can see, I've come back after the half an hour and I've put in the salt, and I'm just working this in. I've got very wet hands because I had a look and discovered that the dough was still very, very wet. So if you go on with wet hands, there's less chance of it sticking to your hands. Not no chance, but less. So just a wee tip for you when you're kneading dough. Now this it reminds me of the texture of the kids' slime, I have to admit, and it's very, very sticky. So I'm a bit concernicus that maybe I've misread the recipe, but I did go back and I hadn't. I'd used the quantities exactly. This is just a very, very wet dough. So I'm making sure that I'm working that salt in so it goes through all the dough. And I am doing my first stretch and fold here. So stretch and fold is instead of kneading, and what that does is it helps to develop the gluten. So I've let that rest for 30 minutes. Well, I'm going to let it rest for 30 minutes. And now it's had its 30 minutes. I was kind of hoping it was going to have thickened up a bit, but absolutely no hope. So again, I'm going in with the stretch and folds just to develop that gluten. So the beauty of doing the stretch and folds is that you're not having to knead the dough constantly for 10 or 15 minutes. You just do your stretch and folds sort of north, south, east and west, as it were, and then cover it over and leave it. Yes, it does tire you having to do that for a couple of hours, every half hour to an hour. But you can be getting on with jobs in between that. It's no great hassle or hardship. And I really like this method because it's just easy and simple, and you work it into your day. So I am going to go ahead and cover this bowl, and I will do my stretch and folds and then leave it to rise overnight. And as if by magic, it's the next morning. The power of the camera, hey? So what I'm doing here is I'm putting some flour into the banneton bowl. Now you don't need one of these. It's a nice to have, but it's not an essential. You can use a bowl lined with a tea towel and that is heavily floured. Now the reason for flouring it is that it helps the dough to come out a lot easier. Also puts a very pretty pattern on there too. So it's twofold. Now look how beautiful and bubbly this dough is, but I can just see that it is still very, very sloppy. It's what they would call a high hydration dough, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm nervous. I'm very, very worried that this is just going to bake and be flat and be an absolute flop. But I want to show you guys this process because I think it's important that you see that people online, potentially have disasters too, and we have things that don't work the way that we think they would or should work. So it's important to see that too, because not everything's perfect in the online world, or it's not as perfect as it's perceived to be. And I want you guys to know that having disasters in the kitchen, or things that look like they're going to be disasters, is okay. It's perfectly normal. We adapt, we overcome, and we get things to work. So please, trust the processes and things will come together. So usually I would be able to get some tension in the dough, and that just helps to firm the bread up and helps with the shaping, but this isn't going to happen with this dough. So at this point, I'm hoping for the very best. This is going to go into the fridge, and it ended up going in the fridge overnight. You can leave it in for a couple of hours if you want, and that hopefully will help this dough to firm up and allow me to score it. But we shall see what happens. So I'm just going to cover this over before I pop it in the fridge because we don't want the dough to dry out. And then I'm going to grab a cup of coffee because I haven't had any yet and I need some desperately. And of course I forgot to film putting this in the oven, but here we go. She actually worked. I was flabbergasted that it worked. I was sure it was going to be a flop. Yes, it's a bit bumpy and knobbly, but you know, that's what happens when you have a very high hydration dough, I think, is and you're using baking parchment. It takes on the shape of the crinkles of the paper, but that's okay. We're all about the taste. It doesn't have to be the prettiest loaf in the world. It's not as vibrantly purple as I had hoped. It's more a pale lilac, I would say. But it's been a fun experiment to do. And, you know, maybe there's a trick that I'm missing. Maybe I need to include an acid, like some lemon juice, to help bring out the vibrancy of the ube powder. I'm not 100% sure. That's something I'll have to go away and have a wee look at. But this bread has been cooling for, I'd say a good hour now. So it's still quite warm inside, but it's very important not to cut bread straight out the oven because it ends up going that horrible gummy texture. I know it's really, really tempting and it's hard to resist, but please give it at least an hour. But that cut up beautifully, and you know, it tasted great. Look at that. I'm really, really pleased with how that turned out. So I want to thank you for joining me this week. Please hit the like and subscribe button if this is something that you've enjoyed. I release new content every Thursday, and until next time, my lovely, take care.